Next presenter is Kevin Mayles from the Open University, who will be presenting a paper on predictive power of indicators at scale, I believe, student success indicators.
Thanks very much, Leah. So I'm Kevin Mayles, Head of Analytics at the Open University. For the last 3 years, I've been leading our institutional strategy to increase the use of analytics to drive student success at the OU. I'm going to start with some acknowledgements. So our institutional strategy and the work at the OU has been very much a collaborative effort, and those collaborations have contributed to this presentation today, and the slides are on SlideShare as well. Just want to start just a reminder of the Open University context. So we have 174,000 students. Average age of our new students is 29. We're open entry, so students don't have to have any prior qualifications before starting study for an undergraduate degree at the OU. And 40% of our new undergrad students have no qualifications or qualifications lower than the normal HE entry within the UK. We have over 20,000 students with a declared disability, and in terms of working at scale, they're the kind of numbers we deal with. So nearly 900,000 assessments submitted last year, 400,000 phone calls received, 175,000 emails. In terms of predictive indicators work, and I'm going to focus very much on the lessons we've learned from implementation of predictive indicators in this talk, and not so much on the technical nature of the predictions, how the models have been built, which have been reported at this conference and through other papers quite widely, and I've got some references at the end of the presentation if you want to know more. We've got two approaches that we've developed at the Open University and taken very much a tactical view at the moment of letting those two approaches continue and bloom and getting some use and piloting from two approaches before thinking strategically how do we start to bring those together if that's the right thing to do. The first was developed by our planning office, and we refer to it as module probabilities, and those have been integrated into our student support intervention tool, and they provide a probability of a student completing and passing each module. And modules at the Open University tend to be quite large in size, 30 or 60 credits, and would take a student pretty much an academic year to study. So they're probably studying one 60-credit module, typically across a normal academic year. So we provide those probabilities in ranges. So tutors and our central student support teams can use those probabilities in targeting student groups for intervention. Our student support teams work on a structured set of interventions throughout the year, and primarily they're looking to use these probabilities at key points, and the key point is around the start. So we can generate probabilities towards the beginning of study or prior to study and target those students who look potentially most vulnerable for completing and passing their module. The second approach is our OU Analyze tool, and this tool predicts whether a student is going to submit their next assignment. So during the course of that module, there might be 5 or 6 assessment points, and we're predicting using OU Analyze whether the model thinks the student's going to submit their next assignment, which our tutors are finding incredibly useful between those assignment points. So these predictions come in weekly, and our tutors, we're operating at distance, so our tutors have very little one-to-one contact with those students, and no kind of group sessions, or very limited group sessions and group contact with the students. So getting a weekly indicator of whether we think that student's going to predict their next assignment is a useful trigger for them to think about who to potentially intervene with. So, lessons from implementing this approach at scale. And my job is to help that implementation and coordinate the groups developing these tools within the university with faculty staff and student support staff in terms of getting those indicators used and piloted. So the first challenge and lesson that we've learned is create the right story for our end users. And that starts with measures and statistics about the predictions. So we're looking particularly at frequently generated predictions and how they can be used to intervene at the right time to help retain students. And we've been thinking about measures associated with accuracy, of course, but also the volume of predictions and whether that volume is manageable and actionable, and also the timeliness of those predictions. Are those predictions coming at the right time to act? So our hypothesis is accurate predictions at a manageable volume that are timely in relation to a student's potential dropout gives us the potential to intervene, and primarily intervene through our associate lecturers. And our associate lecturers look after typically 20 students on each module, hence my typical associate lecturer and their group here. So we use the standard accuracy metrics, precision, recall, but even I'm being recorded, aren't I? Maybe I shouldn't say this. Even at our executive level, we have a wide range of comfort with statistics and even graphs, let's just say. So I could put this up in front of even our executive board and I would get huge engagement with part of that group and complete disengagement with another part of that group, and that is common across each level within the university. So here's our statistics based on predictions made in the last academic year, and the orange line at the top is accuracy, the green line is precision, and the bars are the recall, and that's each week through the module presentation. So as you'd expect, the model gets more accurate through the life of the presentation as we have more trace VLE, behavioural data, assessment data to work on. And put that in front of probably 2/3 to 70% of our users and even our decision makers in the university. And, okay, what does that mean actually? How useful are these predictions that you're producing then? So let's bring it back down to the tutor group. And in terms of accuracy then, by week 5 in that graph, we're starting to get 2/3 of the predictions being true. So there's my 3 students that have been flagged. 2 of them won't actually submit their next assignment. However, okay, at that stage, we're only probably identifying half of the students that aren't submitting their assignments in terms of recall in the model. Okay, I can get that because it's a picture. Okay, and we're relating it now to the actual tutor group and the associate lecturer able to intervene. By week 14 now, we're identifying 2/3 of the non-submitters. Okay, so now we're starting to really be able to identify, wow, if I pick up the phone to one of these students that's been flagged, it's a good chance I'm picking up the phone to someone who may not go on to submit that assignment. I'm having the chance to have the right conversation with them. And these are average numbers as well. So we have some modules where the predictions are getting to 85% precision. Okay, so now if we can get that, the message is if that student is flagged up, pick up the phone. They're not going to submit their next assignment. Volume. So in talking to our users through the piloting, what they're really interested in are the changes from week to week. So week after week, the student is predicted to submit their next assignment, and now the prediction changes to non-submit. That's the trigger. That's the thing they're looking for. So what kind of volumes of those changes are we getting? Are we getting a large oscillation of predictions and therefore a lot of noise, or are we getting manageable levels of changes? So we looked at plotting those changes, what percentage in a given week of the predictions have actually changed from a previous week from positive to negative. And actually, the orange line at the bottom there, which are those changes, is quite low. So turning that into a story for our users, actually, roughly once a fortnight, you'll get a change. Roughly. Okay, sometimes it'll be more, sometimes it might be less, but actually that's manageable, that's actionable. Once a fortnight, I can pick up the phone to one of my students. Timeliness. So this is where we start to get a little bit, there's a big red line at the bottom of this slide that says the measure here is quite crude. So we've measured the gap or distance between when the predictions are made, all those changes in predictions from positive to negative, and the last engagement date we have in our systems for students who didn't go on to complete their module. So are we getting into a window of opportunity with the predictions around the time that those students might be making those decisions? And we've conducted some research at the OU with students who have withdrawn from our courses that suggests that 40% of students who withdraw are thinking about withdrawing for about a month, and another 20% are thinking about that for 2 months. So our hypothesis, our intervention hypothesis is we need to have the conversation with the student in that window to affect that decision. Now there's other hypotheses that might say if you can identify the students who might drop out early enough and employ nudging techniques all the way along, then maybe they don't get to that decision. And of other speakers I've heard already today say that the intervention strategy is, of course, absolutely critical. It's the prediction or the trigger plus the intervention strategy that we're employing that is going to impact the student. So if we looked at all of the first changes, the first time a student is predicted not to submit their TMA, and looked at where that appears relative to their last engagement date, and there's quite a wide range of figures here. The kind of mean is getting us into that window of opportunity within 2 weeks of them disengaging, but there's quite a broad spectrum. And looking at all of the changes, and again, the mean drops down, but we get more of the kind of predictions changes coming into that window of opportunity. But again, I'm going to name which exec dean wouldn't cope with that kind of analysis. And so presenting a relatively simple picture which shows, okay, are those predictions actually happening or arriving to us before the students have actually disengaged from their studies? And at the moment, about 70% are. And about 31, if we leak into 2 weeks after that last engagement date, we're getting 30% of those changes and hitting that kind of critical window of opportunity. So for me, the big lesson learned over the last 2 years in selling the use of predictive indicators is creating that story that applies to the end user, and that's our tutors with their tutor group. Second lesson, start small, find and nurture your champions in your faculties. So we've gone through a process over the last 3 years of going from predicting on 2 modules and interacting quite heavily with those module teams to refine the algorithms, to piloting on about a dozen modules and starting to get the dashboard in front of tutors and getting feedback on how they find the dashboard to use and the accuracy and the efficacy of the predictions, to now piloting on 12 modules with 250 tutors involved, affecting 8,000 students. And next year, possibly 20 modules. That could be as many as 2,000 tutors and 40,000 students. The team sat in the middle who might have to employ that have probably just had a heart attack. I can see Jakob smirking at me from the chair. So we found champions very early on, and this is one of our champions in our health and social care faculty. This is a video, although when I tried it earlier on, it didn't play.
What predictive data does is that it
Just wrapped it.
identifies those students who are at risk of not submitting the next assignment. Now,
It's not working. What you would have heard Chris saying is an advocacy around the use of predictive data and relating it to the professional practice of the associate lecturer, and those predictions being used alongside other information and their experience and knowledge about their students to decide when and how to intervene. Third lesson is don't underestimate the guidance that's going to be required around what the predictions are, how they work, and how to use them, and the kind of messaging to use. It might sound to us that it's relatively straightforward and an obvious thing, but we've had to invest heavily in producing guidance materials, having support available, and videos that walk the users through the use of the predictions, how they can use them, how they should react to them. Create super users and create case studies from your evaluations. So again, from our early piloting, we recruited some of the early users of the system to now train, brief, provide direct support and gather feedback from our current users piloting. So our associate lecturers are now hearing and being briefed not by people like me, administrators from the centre, but people like them, other associate lecturers who have used the system and who have found the system useful in their practice. We have got evaluations going on, both quantitative and qualitative, and what we're finding from those evaluations is that yes, it's a useful tool. Yes, the information between assignments is useful to our associate lecturers. We don't have the quantitative evidence yet that it's definitely impacting retention of our students, but we're yet to get to the end of this academic year and our current piloting with our 250 tutors. But what's really powerful are the small case studies and vignettes and quotes from our tutors. And in fact, what we're finding is, talking to decision makers within our faculties, is that it's these case studies and hearing the voice of the tutor that are more powerful than big evaluation studies and the kind of quantitative impact. Thanks for the plug for our ethics policy from the previous speakers, but the other lesson is foreground that discussion, and we did that early on in our project. So we developed a policy based on 8 principles, all of which are aligned to our core mission as an organisation, to values that we hold dear as the Open University, and then get that information out in front of students. So that policy is published openly on our website under Creative Commons. So anyone who does want to take it and base their own policy work, that is available for you. And we have information available for our students, both in terms of the policy itself and frequently asked questions, and also articles in our Student Help Centre. So if they've got a question about data, how do we use their data, there's articles there that explain how we use their data, and how we use learning analytics specifically to support them through their studies. And my final lesson is you have to repeat, repeat, and repeat. So I've been doing this job for 3 years, yet I was in a meeting with our 4 executive deans last week having this exact same discussion that I was having 2 years ago. And actually repeating the messaging is absolutely necessary. Decision makers change, executives change, but also the issues keep cropping up again and again and again. So we have to keep repeating the messages. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Bravo, that was spectacular timing to the second, I think. Questions for Kevin?
Is there not a danger in predicting performance of students that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yes. And that is a major concern of a lot of our staff. So interestingly, when we've gone through the process of developing our ethics policy, the general feedback we get from our students is they like the idea, actually. Both from our existing students in terms of, yeah, I can see how this will help the university target support better. But the research we've done into students who do withdraw and don't persist with their studies is that they want to be noticed. So students who are struggling want to be noticed. And we've had, and again, I could show many, many quotes from students who have withdrawn saying, well, you know, no one noticed, no one contacted me, I didn't submit an assignment, I didn't get any follow-up kind of thing. But there is a danger of the kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So we've been very careful about which elements of the predictions we also share with our tutors. So we can predict the score of the assignment, but we don't share that with the tutors. So we share whether we think they're going to submit it. We do share a traffic light around whether they might be on the borderline for passing. And one of the powers of the OU Analyse system is that it's not just about dropout and retention, it also deals with the element of achievement. And so we've yet to get into discussions in the university around how, if we can raise achievement, that will help raise retention. A lot of the discussion, primary discussion, is around retention and completion.
Anyone? There was a forest of hands a moment ago.
It was all the same question.
Oh, was it all?
Yeah, the thing that puzzles me now is you're only looking at student performance, but the prediction only works in a very stable and repetitively stable teaching environment. If you have any changes, then that influences the prediction factors, doesn't it? So does it also look at changeability of the environment, like using a different textbook or bringing in some daily news into the teaching class, something that pops up out of the news, something that's unpredictable, basically?
I'm not the best person to answer that question. The cynic is sat in the middle of the room here, but yes, we take into account changes in the module design year on year when creating those predictions. So my advice would be meet up with Zenick afterwards to talk about how the algorithms take that into account. One of the challenges we're grappling with as we get into a space where the predictions are being acted on more is how that affects our ability to determine the accuracy of predictions. So we'll expect to see, hopefully, more false positives in our accuracy figures as we go forward, because the predictions have been acted on and actually that student does go on to submit that assignment because we've actually intervened. And I could spend another 10, 15 minutes, an hour talking about the challenges around capturing interventions so that we can measure the effect of interventions, which is very difficult, particularly in our context.
Okay, I think we should have just one final question and then move on to our last presenter.
Do you share the algorithm and if you do, have you had any problem with gaming?
Do we share the algorithm with? No, we share information about what we're doing, but we're not sharing the algorithm or the prediction with the students. So we very much think that the prediction or the intervention should be mediated by the human being, the tutor, who may know other information about the students. We have many instances that we hear about, even if we're just aiming to do standard interventions with our students, which might be they haven't submitted an assignment, and there are kind of central interventions or emails that will go out and just check with the student, you haven't submitted an assignment, where our associate lecturers have then said, whoa, don't, hang on, I know they've not submitted an assignment, I know the reason they've not submitted an assignment is they had a bereavement in the family last week, don't send them that email. they don't need an email like that from the Open University right now. So we very much think that at the moment, the prediction and the conversation should be mediated through the associate lecturer.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay.
I know Annika needs to do some setup, and we could possibly squeeze in one more quick question while Annika's doing her changeover, but there was actually someone behind you who caught my eye a moment ago, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question about the lessons learned. I think everything you have done sounds very familiar to me, but one thing I was thinking about was, did you ever think about having some kind of financial incentives or some kind of other incentives for the tutors to start using it? So now you said that you have super users, everything, but do you also monitor the users of the learning analytics?
So we have a somewhat complex environment at the OU. So our associate lecturers are all part-time, and they work under a specific contract. So we even have difficulties around talking about whether we should pay the tutors extra for undertaking these interventions or not. To a certain extent, they're paid a fixed fee at the beginning of the year. So there is an element of de-incentivising them to intervene because the less students they have later on, now, the vast majority of our tutors would absolutely want to get all of their students to the end of course, but using incentives in some way is a really kind of difficult discussion to have. Even monitoring on a tutor by tutor group level, the kind of retention rates is a difficult conversation to have. Which is interesting in a higher education context. In a school situation in the UK, every tutor is monitored on their students' achievements, and that's part of their kind of regular discussions that they're having. So difficult conversations around incentives. Sorry.
That's quite all right. I would love to keep hearing about this too.